NIPSCO has put its consumers in an incredibly bad position. Now we have listening sessions, but those don't reduce bills. A lot of what's being discussed with utility reform and with NIPSCO's commitments to understand its customers' needs, in my view, is an incredible misdirect. There has always been affordability language in Indiana's utility regulatory process. There has always been cost of service evaluation requirements in that process. What I like least of all is the pitting of commercial and industrial customers against residents and vice versa. That takes the pressure off NIPSCO's exceptionally high costs and the management practices and decisions which have created them, and it turns it into infighting and mistrust across ratepayers who are all being taken advantage of. In reality, as of the closure of NIPSCO's last rate case, commercial customers already subsidize residential bills by roughly 17 to 33% when you look at the cost of service breakdown. The scrutiny and the scorn should be on NIPSCO. I would encourage every NIPSCO customer to reject the idea that commercial customers are the enemy and double down on the fact that NIPSCO has forced all customers into a very precarious situation. Good morning, Indiana manufacturing leaders. Today, we're looking at how the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission is responding to those complaints and what Indiana's slow 1.1% electronics manufacturing growth over 25 years tells us about the choices we make on high-tech investments today. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through what changed and the questions to put in front of your team so you can defend your operation rather than just absorbing whatever costs and narratives show up on your bill and on TV. Now, if you buy power from NIPSCO anywhere in northern Indiana, what happened at the Gary Public Library this week should change how your future bills are structured, but it probably won't. On Monday night, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission held its 8th listening session out of 10 statewide at the Gary Public Library and Cultural Center. Chairman Andy Zay told a packed room that the commission will use what they're hearing to produce an energy affordability report about 45 to 60 days after the final session on April 22nd. This is part of an investigative inquiry into the 5 Indiana utilities, including NIPSCO. Now, more than 20 people spoke, including state lawmakers and union members. And State Rep Earl Harris Jr. reminded the commission that utilities are not a luxury. He spelled out what many of your employees are living. People choosing between keeping the heat on, buying groceries, filling prescriptions, and paying other bills. Residents describe gas delivery charges that used to be around $20 a month are now closer to $100. One small business representative from Gary talked about a NIPSCO bill that came in at roughly $149,000 after earlier bills in the tens of thousands of dollars. Another resident said her NIPSCO balance has climbed to $2,240, even while she tries to pay it down in installments. And she's talking about going back to work just to keep up. Can you imagine? On the electric side, Citizens Action Coalition has already documented that statewide electric bills are up 17.5%, more than $28 a month on average. NIPSCO residential customers were hit hardest with about a $50 per month increase in 1 year. That's roughly 26.7%. Now, all of this sits on top of a 22% electric rate increase NIPSCO pushed through starting back in 2024, which comes on the heels of another double-digit rate hike the year prior. NIPSCO's formal line is that they do not set prices on their own, and every rate goes through a transparent process with the IURC, the Consumer Counselor, and groups like the Citizens Action Coalition. They point to investments in infrastructure and commitments not to disconnect residential customers for non-payment through mid-May and to a new $1.5 million bill assistance program coming this summer. And here's how I see it. Listening sessions do not lower anybody's bill by themselves. House Enrolled Act 1002 ties utility profits to performance metrics like affordability and service restoration and allows some budget billing and shut-off protections. But if we're not careful, it can turn into another layer of process without touching the fundamental issue, NIPSCO's cost of service and allowed return on equity. When you look at the last rate case, commercial customers are already subsidizing residential rates by double-digit percentages relative to cost of service. Pitting residents against manufacturers changes nothing about that. For you as an Indiana manufacturer, the risk is twofold. First, that affordability gets defined narrowly around residential customers, and additional subsidies are stacked on top of what you already pay. Second, that the underlying cost structure never gets corrected, so you're stuck navigating higher all-in costs for the long term. What should you watch? Watch for the IURC's Energy Affordability Report 45 to 60 days after April 22nd. And remember, that report is not going to make you pay less. Look for whether they talk about aligning rates with cost of service for every customer class and whether they address NIPSCO's management decisions and return on equity in a material way, or just add more layers of assistance programs on top of the same high baseline. And a concrete question for your team. Based on House Enrolled Act 1002 and what we know about NIPSCO's current rate designs, how would changes to performance metrics or new residential subsidies change our plant's all-in energy budget over the next 3-year rate plan? And if you have questions about that, because it's not so straightforward, you can feel free to reach out to me. If your operation is watching the rush of data center and chip announcements and thinking about how to participate, Indiana's past electronics manufacturing should be a warning label. Economist Morton Marcus walks through the numbers from 1998 to 2023. Electronics manufacturing across the United States grew about 4.5% per year, roughly in line with GDP growth nationally. Over the same period, Indiana's electronics sector grew only 1.1% per year, while Indiana's total GDP grew at 4%. In 1998, electronics made up about 5.1% of Indiana's manufacturing output. By 2023, it was down to 2.6%. Meanwhile, our big three of chemicals, motor vehicles, and primary metals deepened their share. Chemical manufacturing alone, which includes pharmaceuticals, is now 6.9% of Indiana's GDP. The point is not that those sectors are bad, not in the least. It's that electronics, which many Hoosiers once thought defined towns through names like RCA, Delco, Magnavox, and Western Electric, did not keep pace here, even while it expanded nationally. Marcus asks hard questions. Were Indiana electronics operations mostly branch plants, easy to consolidate or close when corporate priorities changed? Did state tax and regulatory policy fail to reward capital investment and automation at the right times? Were we late adapting to shifts in production demand, design, and pricing compared to other regions? Or did labor, management, or policy all contribute pieces? He does not claim one simple cause, but the pattern is clear. We underperformed in a sector that should have been a strength. For you, this is not a history lesson for its own sake. Right now, Indiana is trying to catch up in data centers and chips. Communities are asking whether these are the right bets. If we do not learn from electronics, we can easily build branch plant style facilities that extract incentives, hire for a while, and then slow walk new investment when the market changes. So, what do you watch? Watch how current deals structure ownership, decision making, and capital investment commitments. Look for whether incentives are tied to sustained reinvestment, local engineering and design work, and clear clawbacks if milestones are missed, or whether the state is simply paying to host someone else's production for a few years. And a direct question for your team. What specific lessons from Indiana's electronics decline are we using as filters when we evaluate any opportunities tied to chips, data centers, or other high-tech work, so we don't repeat a 1.1% growth story in a sector that should have been a winner for us? Today, you're dealing with two forces that pull in opposite directions. If you're not careful, utilities treating affordability as a communications exercise while bills climb, and a high-tech manufacturing history that shows how easy it is to fall behind even in sectors that should be natural fits for Indiana. The takeaway from today is this. Indiana and the United States more broadly have incredible resources, incredible capacity, and the place those two intersect with the most compounding effect is the people, the workers, the innovators, the builders, the makers. The real problem is a belief in scarcity, the feeling that we're almost at the end. We're not almost at the end. Our energy resources can be abundant, cheap, reliable, and well governed. Antiquated regulatory processes can be reformed. Entrenched monopolies have a soft underbelly that can be exposed and exploited. Manufacturing and innovation can expand rather than shrink. The point, in my view, is a commitment to abundance and the idea that we can create better systems, even out of the ones that look immovable right now. We're not stuck with whatever NIPSCO or any other Indiana utility wants to hand us. We're not stuck with manufacturing decline. We're not stuck with regulatory processes that no one can read. We're not stuck with line items on our bills that none of us can understand. We're not stuck with whatever the narrative says we have to accept. The bottom line today is this: you should be ruthless about understanding and challenging the stories around energy affordability and high tech investment, and equally ruthless about believing in Indiana's capacity to build better systems, better deals, and better manufacturing outcomes than the last 25 years would suggest. Now, obviously, I don't run your plant. You do that. My real job as CEO of Tactical Energy Group is to stay on top of everything that changes the cost and reliability of your power and the economics of making things in the state of Indiana. And that's so that we can build the right products and programs for the manufacturing community. But while I am doing that work anyway, this brief is my way of giving you as much of that insight as I possibly can, so you can spend more time running your operation and less time trying to decode bills, rate cases, and headlines. Now, let me give you a few questions you can walk straight into your morning huddle tomorrow. If these are hard to answer, it might mean the link between policy, headlines, and your operating plan is a bit fuzzy, and that is where money can leak out over time. So here are the questions for your morning huddle. Number one, with House Enrolled Act 1002 tying utility profits to metrics like affordability and service restoration on a 3-year rate plan, do we have a clear view of how those metrics could either raise or lower our all-in energy costs with NIPSCO over the next contract cycle? Looking at the complaints about NIPSCO delivery charges and large unpredictable bills, have we mapped out how much room our budget has if the delivery components rise faster than the usage charges? And what operational changes would we make if that happens? Question number three. As Indiana courts new data centers and chip makers, what hard lessons from the state's 1.1% electronics manufacturing growth rate are we baking into our own strategy around customer concentration, capital investment expectations, and how we evaluate long term partners? And question number four. Internally, are we operating from a mindset of scarcity, assuming high energy costs and manufacturing decline are just the way it is? Or are we treating abundant, affordable, reliable energy and a stronger manufacturing base as non negotiable goals we plan against and advocate for? I think that might be the most important question of all. So, if this helped you connect what's happening in Gary and in our manufacturing history to the decisions you're making this year, send it to another Indiana manufacturing leader who should be ahead of these things instead of reacting to them later. These are exactly the kinds of stories that either box you in or open up room to negotiate better deals, depending on how seriously you take them. If you want more tools and context like this, you can always find us at tacticalenergygroup.com. I am Daniel Burke. This is TEG Daily, and I will see you tomorrow.